Thank you, Speaker. Speaker, my question's for the Premier. The Premier recently put forward a new law that will force all electricity companies to include her political messaging with hydro bills right up until the next election. In fact, her regulation contains the exact messaging that she plans to force the companies to use. How can this Premier justify this shameless self-promotion at the expense of everyday families in Ontario?
Thank you, Premier.
Well, Mr. Speaker, I know that the Minister of Energy is going to want to speak to the details of this, but Mr. Speaker, I am quite sure that even the Leader of the Third Party would like to see everyone who's eligible receive the reduction that they are that they're eligible for, that they're entitled to, Mr. Speaker, I'm sure that the Leader of the Third Party knows, because she's been talking about it in this legislature for weeks, Mr. Speaker. She knows that people need that relief on their hydro bills. She knows, Mr. Speaker, that people need that 25% reduction. She knows, Mr. Speaker, that in rural and remote communities that people need even more than that because distribution charges are so high. So, Mr. Speaker, I know that the Leader of the Third Party supports a reduction, Mr. Speaker, and the Minister of Energy will speak to the details of what's in the bill. Thank you very much.
That's the whole point. People are going to get it, regardless if there's partisan advertising in the bills or not. So why is this Premier doing that? Look, this law forces electricity companies to do the Premier's dirty work by trying to sell the people of Ontario on her $45 billion hydro borrowing scheme. This is a new low, Speaker, in political manipulation at the expense of Ontario families who are already struggling to just keep up with their skyrocketing bills, Speaker. Is this Premier so desperate to save her political skin that she is going to force families to pay for her own partisan advertising?
Terrible. Thank you.
Minister of Energy.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Very pleased to rise and talk about our Fair Hydro plan because I find it interesting from the questioning from the Leader of the Third Party, because just last week, Mr. Speaker, when I was in Sault Ste. Marie and when I spoke with Steve and Lucy, who own the M&Ms and the other country-style donuts that the Leader of the Opposition spoke to, I found it very interesting that they didn't know about the Fair Hydro plan. They didn't know about the benefits that they were going to be getting when the Fair Hydro passes, Mr. Speaker. But it's interesting, Mr. Speaker, that the Leader of the Third Party chose not to tell them about the plan. She chose not to tell them about all of the things that will be coming, Mr. Speaker. So you know what we're doing, Mr. Speaker? We're going to ensure that we're going to tell them.
Finish, please.
I know, Mr. Speaker, that we have one party that doesn't have a plan. We have a new party. We'd like to hear what that new party will have to say. And then from the third party, Mr. Speaker, they don't even talk about their plan anymore. We will ensure that we talk about our plan so everybody in this province knows that they'll be getting 25% off before summer.
Final supplementary.
Speaker, everybody in Ontario will be shocked when they see their bill. They'll be shocked to learn that they're now paying for the Liberals' advertising to be delivered right to their doorstep by law, Speaker, because the Liberals are putting it in legislation, in regulation, to put the advertising for that party into people's bills. People expected so much better from this Premier, but time and time again, they have been let down. Instead of forcing electricity companies to advertise her borrowing scheme, will the Liberal Premier instead put her energy into coming up with a plan that helps people instead of helping her political party and herself?
Thank you. Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. 800,000 families in this province will see a 40 to 50% reduction. Thank you to the Premier and this government bringing forward legislation, Mr. Speaker, that will help families. Every single household in this province, Mr. Speaker, 500,000 small businesses and farms, they will receive a 25% reduction on average, Mr. Speaker, come summer when we can get this legislation passed. But what really is bothersome, Mr. Speaker, is last week the NDP confirmed that they would repeal the Fair Hydro plan. The admission, courtesy of the candidate in Sault Ste. Marie, and that comes as a shock to everyone. For months, we've talked about the need to help families with the cost of electricity, but when we could have supported a plan to cut bills by 25% for those low incomes between 40 and 50. You know what they said, Mr. Speaker?
We'll have to find out. The member from Niagara West Glanbrook is warned. You may now finish.
As I was saying, Mr. Speaker, you know what they said, Mr. Speaker? No.
No.
Thank you. New question, the Leader of the Third Party.
Thank you, Speaker. My next question is also for the Premier, but I have to say I look forward to forming a government and cleaning up the mess that these Liberals have made in our electricity system.
And it's going to happen.
In her political insert, Speaker, the Premier isn't even telling the people of Ontario the whole story.
Stop the clock. The member from Etobicoke North is warned. And plenty more are waiting. You're just sitting too close to me. Carry on, please.
Political insert, Speaker. The Premier isn't even telling the people of Ontario the whole story. Not even close. She's leaving out the part about her hydro borrowing plan, wiping out any savings for families and costing Ontarians much, much more in the long run. Why is the Premier okay with telling Ontarians only half the story?
Mr. Speaker, we've been very clear with the people of Ontario and will continue to be clear with the people of Ontario that we understand that the investments that we've made in the electricity system in this province had a cost associated with them, Mr. Speaker, and that cost is being borne right now by this generation, and that this is an asset that is going to last for many, many years, Mr. Speaker, and that we are going to spread the cost over a longer period. Like a mortgage, Mr. Speaker, there is a cost associated with doing that. We've been very clear from the moment we brought out this plan, Mr. Speaker, but this is a plan that is being implemented right now. People are going to see these reductions. They're already beginning to see these reductions, and they will see full implementation by summer if the legislation passes, Mr. Speaker. Not in 2020, not somewhere down the line if the federal government agrees to do something maybe sometime, Mr. Speaker, as the NDP strategy would have had it. We're acting right now, helping people right now with their electricity bills, Mr. Speaker.
Supplementary.
Well, here's a news flash, Speaker. She's so clear that nobody believes her anymore. Nobody believes a word she says anymore. That's how clear she's been with the people of Ontario. In about 4 years, Speaker, in about 4 years, Ontarians will see the whole truth of this plan in black and white, in the form of higher hydro bills that are going to continue to skyrocket for the next 30 years. By neglecting to include this fact in her political insert, the Premier is showing Ontarians once again where her priorities lie, with herself and her party. The Premier is willing to tell Ontario families and businesses a half-truth in hopes that it is going to bring her power or hang on to her power for just a little bit longer, Speaker. That is the MO of this Premier and her Liberal government.
Question.
Will she show some leadership? Will she show some respect for the people of this province and withdraw that odious regulation immediately?
Thank you.
Minister of Energy.
Minister of Energy.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We're making sure that 25% is coming off of everyone's bills, Mr. Speaker, right across the province. Small businesses, farms, and families. And I hear they keep talking about 4 years, Mr. Speaker. For the next 4 years, it is true, we are holding the cost to the rate of inflation. That's good news in the short term, and it's good news in the medium term, Mr. Speaker. And when it comes to the long term, it is this party, the only party that actually has a plan, Mr. Speaker, that is working now, is going to work in the medium term, and is going to work in the long term. Our long-term energy plan, Mr. Speaker, will continue to find ways to pull costs out of the system. Their pamphlet, their ideas, is coming up with some type of pie-in-the-sky committee that will actually talk about things, Mr. Speaker. We're acting. We're making sure that we're reducing bills now, in the future, and we'll continue to look after Ontarians in the long term as well, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. Final supplementary.
Well, Ontarians are smart, and I think that they're going to see right through this Liberal hydro scheme, Speaker. They'll see through the Premier's $45 billion hydro plan, and they will see these political inserts for exactly what they are, a sneaky way for the Premier to try to save her own political skin leading up to the next election. Will this Premier stop the political games once and for all? Stop the political games and withdraw this regulation immediately.
Thank you. Be seated, please. Be seated, please. Thank you. Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So let's be clear. The LDCs and the government advertise for price updates, Mr. Speaker, for rate hearings, for programs like the Ontario Electricity Support Program, which they're voting against, Mr. Speaker, the Save On Energy Program, which will help small businesses, which they're voting against, Mr. Speaker. It seems, you know, they like to say no to everything. No to that expanded Ontario Electricity Support Program. No to the new $200 million affordability fund for families, and no to eliminating the delivery cost on reserve First Nations, Mr. Speaker. I know Regional Chief Day and Chief Ava Hill have talked about how this Fair Hydro plan is going to change the lives of many First Nations peoples, Mr. Speaker, and that is something that this Premier and this government is doing. It seems, Mr. Speaker, that the party opposite has been watching a little bit too much Letterkenny. All they've been saying is, it's a hard no, Mr. Speaker.